What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Journey to XRP, the place where we talk about crypto without the hype, but with a bit of heart. So, the other day I saw a comment that really caught my attention. Someone boldly wrote, "If XRP ever hits $1,000, millions of us will become billionaires overnight." Now, that's a pretty dramatic claim, right? I mean, imagine logging into your account one morning and realizing you're suddenly sitting on generational wealth, mansions, Lambos, private islands. It's the kind of fantasy that lights up every crypto forum on the internet. But here's the thing, I'm not one to dismiss or blindly believe a claim like that. Instead, I thought, okay, what would it actually take for that to happen? Could millions of people really become billionaires at once? And if not, who actually would get rich if XRP ever reached $1,000? That curiosity led me down one of the deepest rabbit holes I've ever explored in this space. I started digging into distribution data, market cap math, and even community debates that most people never bother to check. And let me tell you what I found completely changed the way I think about this whole everyone gets rich narrative. See, a lot of people in the crypto community truly believe XRP is massively undervalued, that one day it'll explode to $100, maybe even $1,000, and I get it. XRP has history. It's been the underdog, the lawsuit survivor, the comeback kid. So, when someone says 1,000 XRP, part of us wants to believe it. We've seen crazier things in crypto before. But, of course, the skeptics quickly jump in and they've got their favorite counter-arguments locked and loaded. First, they talk about market cap, saying it would be too big, impossible. And second, they argue that if XRP did hit $1,000, millions of holders would instantly become billionaires, flooding the world with new ultra-wealthy people, which they say is unrealistic. Now, that second point got stuck in my head. I thought, wait a minute, is that actually true? Are there really that many people holding huge stacks of XRP? That's when I decided to find out for myself. I started by pulling up the XRP rich list, which ranks wallets based on how much XRP they hold. What I discovered there was eye-opening because it turns out the majority of XRP wallets hold only tiny amounts. And we're talking a few XRP here, a few XRP there. Nothing close to the well-seized numbers people imagine. At that moment, I realized something. This entire millions of billionaires idea might just be a myth built on assumptions. So I started piecing everything together, the wallet data, the community chatter, and a fascinating video from a YouTuber named 24 Hours Crypto who actually explored this exact question. I even brought the topic up on our free educational Discord server and link in the description. And wow, the discussion that followed was intense. People had all kinds of takes, some saying anything's possible, others insisting never going to happen. But as the conversation unfolded, one pattern became clear. Most people had never actually looked at how XRP is distributed. They were chasing the dream, but missing the data. And that's exactly what I want to explore in today's episode. Because by the end of this video, you'll see why the reality of an XRP mega pump isn't what most people imagine. You'll understand who actually holds the bulk of XRP, what would really happen if the price ever reached $1,000, and why the math tells a completely different story. So, grab a coffee, settle in, and get ready for some honest, eye-opening truth bombs. Because once we break down the numbers, the whole millions of billionaires fantasy falls apart in a way that's both surprising and empowering. Let's dive in. All right. So, before we start dreaming about 1,000 XRP, let's take a step back and actually understand how XRP is distributed among holders. Because this right here is where the entire story begins to make sense. Now, every cryptocurrency has what's known as a distribution curve, basically a breakdown of who owns how much. And in XRP's case, this distribution is one of the most misunderstood things in the entire community. People hear 6 or 7 million XRP wallets exist, and instantly think that means 6 or 7 million people will all be rich if XRP moons, but that's not how it works. So, let's talk about the XRP rich list, which is a public record showing how XRP is spread out across all wallets. The first thing that jumps out is how many wallets hold tiny amounts. And when I say tiny, I mean really tiny, less than 20 XRP in most cases. According to the data, over 3 million XRP wallets hold between 0 and 20 XRP each. That's it. These are mostly test wallets, exchange leftovers, or forgotten accounts. No, the kind of wallets people set up years ago when XRP was cheap, transferred a bit in, and then never touched again. Some of them literally hold the digital equivalent of finding a $20 bill in an old jacket pocket. Fun, but not life-changing. Now let's move one level up. Wallets that hold between 20 and 500 XRP. There are about 2.5 million wallets in this range. Altogether, they hold roughly 210 million XRP, which sounds like a lot until you remember that XRP's total supply is tens of billions. So let's do some quick simple math. If you average it out, each of those wallets has about 83 XRP. At today's prices, that's roughly $250, $300 worth. Nice. Sure, but even if XRP hit $1,000 per coin, that's about $83,000 total, not billionaire money, not even millionaire money, just a solid windfall, maybe enough to pay off some bills or fund a great vacation. Now here's where it gets really interesting. When you combine those two lower groups, wallets holding 0500 XRP, you realize that they represent about 81% of all XRP wallets. That's more than 4 out of every 5 wallets in existence. And yet those same 81% of holders own only about 233 million XRP combined out of a total supply of nearly 100 billion. That's a microscopic fraction, not even 1%. So right away, this destroys the millions of billionaires theory. The overwhelming majority of XRP holders simply don't have enough XRP for that math to ever make sense. If XRP reached $1,000, sure, their portfolios would go up dramatically, but we're talking 5 figures, not 9. And here's another thing people often miss. One wallet doesn't always mean one person. Many investors, especially whales and early adopters, hold their XRP in multiple wallets for security reasons. Some have one wallet on an exchange, another in cold storage, and another in a hardware wallet. So, when we look at the millions of wallets number, we're not really looking at millions of people. We're probably looking at far fewer. Some estimates say under 1 million actual individuals globally. So, what does that tell us? It tells us that even if XRP skyrocketed to $1,000, the number of true mega winners would be extremely small. The vast majority of XRP holders would make some great gains, but not life-changing wealth. And honestly, that's okay. It's not a bad thing. It just means we need to be realistic. Because when you actually understand how distribution works, the story shifts from everyone gets rich to a few get rich, many do well. And most see meaningful but modest returns. Now that we've got this foundation clear, let's go a level deeper into the whale territory, because that's where the real concentration of XRP exists, and it's where we'll uncover who's actually positioned to win big if XRP ever truly moons. Alright, so now that we've seen how the majority of XRP wallets only hold small amounts, let's move up the ladder into what I like to call whale territory, because this is where the story takes a completely different turn. You see, when people talk about millions of billionaires, they're assuming that all XRP wallets belong to individual people. But in the crypto world, one person can own multiple wallets, and one wallet can represent the holdings of thousands of people, like an exchange wallet, for example. Let's break that down. A lot of large wallets you see on the XRP rich list aren't regular people like you or me. They're exchange addresses, custodial wallets, or even corporate accounts holding funds for thousands, sometimes millions of users. Binance, Coinbase, and Bitstamp all have massive XRP wallets. But those don't belong to one whale. They represent collective holdings. On the flip side, there are also true whales, individuals who were early investors, developers, or institutional players who accumulated millions of XRP back when it was fractions of a penny. These are the people and entities who would experience life-changing gains if XRP ever did hit the 1,000 mark. But here's where things get interesting. Analysts estimate that there are less than 1 million actual XRP holders in the entire world. That's already a tiny number compared to global population, but among them, only a few thousand wallets hold over 100,000 XRP. And when you go higher than that, I say over 1 million XRP, the number of wallets drops to just a few hundred. In fact, according to recent data, only around 663 wallets hold over 5 million XRP each. That's it. And those are likely to include Ripple founders, early investors, and institutional entities. So, think about that for a second. Out of billions of people on this planet, only a few hundred wallets truly have the potential to see those jaw-dropping generational wealth numbers if XRP were to reach $1,000. Everyone else in the millions of small holders would see great returns, yes, but nothing close to billionaire territory. And this is where we start to separate the myth from the math. Let's do a quick reality check with simple numbers. If you own 500 XRP, which for most retail investors is already a solid position, and XRP hit $1,000, that's $500,000, a life-changing amount for sure. But not billionaire status. To hit $1 billion at that price, you'd need to be holding 1 million XRP. Now, how many people do you think actually hold that much? Practically no one. See, the millions of billionaires claim falls apart once you understand how concentrated XRP ownership really is. It's not evenly spread, but it's top-heavy, just like most assets in the world. And honestly, that's not unique to XRP. The same pattern exists in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and even traditional finance. A small number of players hold a large share of the value. Now, that doesn't mean XRP can't create wealth for everyday people. It absolutely can. But it means that realistic expectations matter more than viral dreams. The ones who will see life-changing wealth from XRP are the ones who've been accumulating for years. The early adopters, the visionaries, and yes, some institutional players who understand how the XRP ledger could fit into the future of finance. And this also ties into another massive misconception that keeps popping up, the market cap argument. People love to say if XRP goes to $1,000, its market cap would be too big. It can't happen. But that's not exactly true either. The market cap is just a snapshot. Price times circulating supply. It doesn't represent actual money sitting in the market. Prices move based on liquidity and demand, not the full market cap. So, while a 1,000 XRP would imply a huge valuation, it doesn't mean trillions of new dollars suddenly have to appear. We'll go deeper into that in the next section, but for now, the main takeaway is this. There aren't millions of whales waiting to become billionaires. There are only hundreds, maybe a few thousand at most. The rest of the community, us included, are positioned for potential success, but not for generational billionaire status. And you know what? That's perfectly fine, because once we understand how the system actually works, we stop chasing the fantasy and start building a smarter strategy. So now that we've broken down the ownership structure, who holds how much XRP, and why the millions of billionaires myth doesn't hold up, let's talk about what it all really means. Because understanding the implications here can change how you view the entire XRP ecosystem and even how you plan your own strategy moving forward. Let's start with the obvious question. If XRP somehow reached $1,000, who actually benefits and how much? For the average XRP holder, the outcome would still be pretty incredible. Even though most wallets hold small amounts, that price jump would still multiply their portfolios massively. Someone with just 100 XRP would suddenly be sitting on $100,000. That's nothing to scoff at. That's debt freedom, maybe a car, a small home down payment, or the seed money for a business. But when people throw around the idea that everyone's going to become a billionaire, they're missing how value concentration actually works. Wealth in both traditional finance and crypto tends to flow upward toward those who already hold more. So, yes, if XRP ever does go to $1,000, there will be new millionaires and possibly even a few new billionaires, but they won't be coming from the 3 million wallets that hold under 20 XRP. They'll come from the top 1% of holders, the ones sitting on hundreds of thousands or even millions of XRP. Now, that might sound unfair at first, but it's the same pattern we've seen throughout history. When Apple or Amazon stock exploded, it wasn't every small investor who became a billionaire. It was the early believers and institutional players who positioned themselves long before the rest of the world caught on. XRP follows the same rule. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is something most people don't realize. Even if you're not a whale, a rising XRP price still changes the entire landscape for everyone involved. Here's how. Increased liquidity. A higher price per XRP means Ripplet and other institutional systems can move larger amounts of value with fewer tokens. That strengthens the utility argument and attracts more adoption. Institutional confidence. Big price moves bring attention. Banks, payment networks, and even governments start noticing when an asset shows stability at high valuation levels. Retail sentiment, even if you're not becoming a billionaire, that price movement can massively boost your net worth and give confidence to long-term holders, which is key to keeping momentum in the ecosystem. So, while the number of billionaires may be small, the impact of a high XRP price would ripple, no pun intended, through the entire market. It would prove that the technology works, that institutions are using it, and that the early believers, the community we've built here, were right all along. Now let's also touch on the psychological side, because a lot of this 1000 XRP talk feeds into what we call opium, the feel-good dream that keeps people holding through years of volatility. And look, I get it. Hope is powerful. It keeps the community together. It inspires people to stay educated and engaged. But without realism, hope turns into delusion. That's why conversations like this matter. Because once you understand the data, the math, and the distribution, you can start seeing the bigger picture. Most of us won't become billionaires. But that doesn't mean XRP can't change our lives. Even modest holdings could translate into meaningful financial wins in the future. Maybe not private island money, but freedom from debt money. The kind of wealth that gives you more choices, more peace, and more control over your time. And honestly, that's what this channel and this entire journey to XRP is really about. It's not about chasing fantasies. It's about understanding the real opportunity, the long-term potential, and positioning ourselves intelligently while the rest of the world laughs. Because when regulation settles, when adoption grows, and when liquidity floods into digital assets, XRP will be one of the first in line. And whether it hits $100, $1,000, or even just $10, every dollar higher validates the vision we've been talking about for years. In short, not everyone's going to become a billionaire, but everyone in this community has the chance to benefit if they play the long game, right? All right, family, now that we've broken down the myths and the math, it's time to get real about what actually you can do. Because look, whether XRP hits $10, $100, or $1,000, the truth is this. Only the people who have a strategy will benefit. Everyone else will either panic sell, FOMO buy, or end up stuck watching opportunities pass them by. So, let's talk about a few smart steps that every XRP investor, big or small, can follow to make sure they're positioned well for whatever happens next. 1. Focus on accumulation, not prediction. Too many people in crypto get obsessed with price predictions. They want to know exactly when XRP will hit $10 or $589 or $1,000. But the truth is, nobody knows. Not me, not you, not even David Schwartz. What we can control is our accumulation strategy. How consistently we're building our positions during quiet, boring market phases. The whales don't get rich by guessing. They get rich by accumulating when others are distracted. So rather than trying to time the next pump, focus on steady accumulation. Even small, consistent buys weekly or monthly can build a solid position over time. Because if XRP ever does what we all think it's capable of doing, you won't care whether you bought at 0.45 or 0.55, you'll just be glad you bought. 2. Keep a realistic profit plan. This is where most retail investors fail. They have no exit plan. They say, I'm holding till $1,000. And then when XRP hits $5, they panic and sell everything. Instead, set tiered profit targets. Here's an example. Not financial advice, just illustration. Take out 10% of your holdings. If XRP hits $5, another 10% at $20, then maybe 20% at $50, and keep a long-term bag for the bigger moves. This approach lets you secure profits while still keeping skin in the game. You'd be shocked how many investors watch their portfolios go up 10 times and back down again, all because they never had a plan. 3. Don't be fooled by market. Cap myths. You've heard it before. XRP can't reach $100 because the market cap would be too big. But remember what we talked about earlier. Market cap doesn't represent actual liquidity, it's just a formula. Price times supply. What moves price is buying pressure versus selling pressure, supply and demand. So instead of getting caught up in scary, impossible numbers, focus on utility, adoption, and liquidity growth. Those are the real catalysts that determine whether a token can scale in price sustainably. 4. Think long-term utility will win. XRP is not a meme coin. It's not trying to win a popularity contest. It's building infrastructure for banks, institutions, and global payments. That means the biggest moves for XRP will likely come not from hype, but from implementation. When institutions begin using XRP through Ripple Prime, or when tokenized assets start settling on the XRP ledger, the value shift could be fast and massive. So the strategy here is simple. Stop thinking like a day trader. Start thinking like a stakeholder in the future of digital finance. Hold your XRP safely. Stay informed. Watch the fundamentals, not just the charts. 5. Protect your assets. It doesn't matter how much XRP you have. Your what matters is that you don't lose it. Use hardware wallets for long-term storage. Keep your recovery phrases offline. Avoid shady exchanges or phishing links. And if you do trade, always use proper security tools, two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and verified wallets. The future is digital, but so are the scams. 6. Stay grounded. Mindset is everything. Finally, remember this. Investing is 20% strategy, 80% psychology. You need patience, discipline, and emotional control. There will be days XRP dips 30%. And that's when the impatient sell and the smart accumulate. Your goal isn't to get rich overnight. Your goal is to stay in the game long enough to see the full story play out. Because when regulation hits, adoption follows, and the digital finance rails of the future start running on blockchain, guess what? The people who stayed calm, consistent, and focused, they'll win. All right, let's bring this all home. If there's one thing I want you to take away from everything we've talked about in this video, it's this. Real wealth isn't about luck. It's about patience, conviction, and understanding. You see, every few years in crypto, there's a wave of hype. New predictions come out. XRP to 1,000, Bitcoin to 1,000,000. We're all going to make it. And every time people rush in, some make money, most get burned, and only a small percentage actually hold long enough to see their thesis play out. The difference between the winners and everyone else isn't timing, it's mindset. And that's what this journey to XRP has always been about. Not just chasing numbers on a screen, but developing the kind of mindset that lets you see through the noise, stay calm through the volatility, and think long-term when everyone else is panicking short-term. Because here's the truth. If you're an XRP today, before full regulation, before mass adoption, before institutional liquidity, you are early. You're part of a very small percentage of the population that even knows what XRP is, let alone understands what it's trying to do. That alone is something to be proud of. Now, will XRP hit $1,000? Nobody can say for sure. It might not. The market doesn't move in straight lines, but what I can tell you with absolute confidence is that the world is moving toward blockchain infrastructure. And XRP is one of the few assets that's actually built for that purpose. So instead of obsessing over price targets, ask yourself this. Am I positioning myself for the long term? Do I understand why I'm holding what I'm holding? Do I have a plan for when things finally take off? If you can answer yes to those questions, you're already ahead of 90% of the market. Now let's be real. The road ahead will not be easy. There will be dips, there will be FUD. There will be moments when you question everything. But that's the price of being early to a revolution. Think about this. Every major financial shift in history, from gold to paper money, from paper to digital, from local banking to global, was met with doubt, resistance, and fear. The people who held conviction during those transitions became the builders of the next era. That's exactly where we are now. You and I and everyone in this community are watching the next great shift in finance unfold from traditional systems to tokenized borderless blockchain-driven liquidity. And the XRP ledger is right at the center of that transformation. So yes, keep your eyes on the price, but keep your heart on the vision. Because even if XRP never hits $1,000, even if it only goes to $50 or $100, the people who understood what they were holding and why will still come out ahead. It's not about becoming a billionaire. It's about gaining freedom. Freedom from fear, freedom from debt, freedom to choose how you live your life. And if XRP, this tiny digital asset that most of the world still ignores, can play even a small part in that for you, then that's a win. So as we wrap up today, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being part of this community, for showing up, for staying curious, and for thinking bigger than the mainstream narrative. We're early, we're focused, and we're in this together. Whether XRP hits $10, $100, or $1,000, the journey is where the real value lies. So keep learning, keep accumulating wisely, and keep your conviction strong, because when the next wave of adoption comes, you'll be ready. And as always, I'll see you on the next one. This is Journey to XRP signing.